Yo, welcome to episode 7 of the Larry Ohh Show. Today, we have a very, very special episode for you. But before we get into that, my co-host,
it's John Phelps. How's it going, everybody?
And I'm Larry Ohh. This is an FL Studio podcast for all music producers of any kind, but mainly, we talk FL Shop here.
FL
Shop.
Studio Universe.
Before we really get into things, I wanted to mention again, every Tuesday we do an FL Studio giveaway on the podcast. The way to enter it is in the comments on YouTube. We're going to be doing a keyword somewhere in the podcast. I'm going to mention it. When I mention that keyword, go to the comments, hurry, run to the comments. And every week I pick a winner and I reply to them in the comments. Again, shout out to FL Studio for supplying FL Studio Producer Edition every single week. Crazy.
Game changer.
Yep. So I
don't think anybody's doing that.
Nah, nobody's doing
We're the ones.
Nobody's doing the per week. So I was doing them like on Instagram every month, and I was doing like a handful just in like one shot every month, but decided to move it to the podcast. I think it would just be like super dope.
And that shows you like how much Image Line is really focusing on building up the community and usership as a whole. It's crazy.
Facts.
Bro.
Shout out Image Line again.
Amazing.
Yeah, so the reason we have a very special episode is because we have a very special guest. Our first virtual guest on the pod. If you don't know him, you must be like you must be living under a rock. Because the reason why this episode is very special for me is because he bases like almost all his content around my favorite plugin in the world. I rant and I rave. If you know me, you know I've heard it. You heard me talk about it. You heard me talk about it in every single. Every other video. I'll mention it. I don't care. I'm on a podcast with somebody else. I'm mentioning the plugin. It's Patcher, and this man is the Patcher GOAT. And just let me get straight to the point. His name is Frank Pohl. If you don't know him, go look him up. You're gonna learn a lot about him in this episode. His name is Frank Pohl. Thank you for joining us, Frank. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
We got to insert that sound effect that you have in your videos. Like, yeah.
Hell yeah. Yo,
welcome.
So the FL Patcher GOAT, Frank Pohl.
For real.
Thank you for the compliment. That's a very good compliment.
It's well deserved.
I'm just a nerd.
Yo, we're all nerds here. We talked about that in the last episode about like just nerding out on some stuff. It's great to be a nerd in 2024.
So can I jump right into like, when did you kind of start like fixating on the Patcher element of FL Studio? Because I was watching some of your videos and it's like mind blowing the stuff that you do with it.
Basically, I'm always very curious about music. My curiosity, it's what brought me into music production. Actually, I was always figuring out how that artist made that sound. How's that possible? I was discovering stuff. And so I discovered how to make music first, and then I started to become more technical, and my questions were always there, like why that song sounds louder than the other one. They're both at the same peak level. So those, very standard questions, grow on me until I decided to really dig into it. So I became a patcher fixated because I wanted to experiment, and I wanted to know why plugins, sounded that good instead of maybe stock plugins, which, by the way, stock plugins sound as good as, premium plugin. Let's
Facts.
Get that out.
Fact.
Facts. Big facts.
Yeah.
But
my bad. Keep going.
Sorry.
Not good.
But of course, plugins that you see on the market, they're more fancy, and most of the time they hide something behind the hood. And my quest was to discover what's happening behind the hood. So that's how it started, basically.
That's awesome, man. What year did you start on FL? Like, when did you start on FL? What version? And I'm always curious about that with FL users.
I remember that I got on FL when I started releasing music, because before I was playing with the demo version. So I was actually creating music, and then I couldn't even save the project. So I was just keeping the computer on for days.
Right.
And
Been there.
that was the way.
Been there. I think we've all been there.
I actually bought it when I was, convinced to use FL, because he has the lifetime free updates, of course. And there was Harmor. Harmor was the new thing, and I was really into it. So I thought, okay, let's stick with FL because I was also playing with other software.
Right.
But FL was always my home.
Awesome. Did you use anything else before FL, or was that your first?
It was my first, but then I tried Ableton.
Yep.
And I like Ableton also, but FL was like I said, was my home, so I naturally felt more comfortable using FL, and I stick with it until now.
Right.
Never switched.
Do you find that using Ableton in comparison to FL, that you can do as much tweaking, kind of be, under the hood, so to speak, in Ableton as with FL, or?
I always felt that Ableton felt very cold for some reason, not in the sound, just in the interface and in the workflow, because I felt that actually you can get very specific and very nerd in Ableton as well, but the results were all like, I don't know, something that doesn't resonate with me.
Sure.
While FL, for some reason, felt more fun, and I just, kept using it. And one of my, the very good thing that I did was I went to discover the DAW 100%. When you dig into all the functions that the DAW allows you to do, that was the first step when I became, even more nerd about, effects and stuff.
Wow.
And as I said, I was more focused on music production first, and then I started to get more fixated on mixing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why my patches are all effects. They're no instruments.
Yeah. Yep.
And you like, what genres do you like to make the most?
Mostly pop music,
Mhm.
but dance, pop, EDM. I've been an artist for a lot of years doing EDM, but always music that is radio friendly, nothing insane.
Got you. What was the first patcher preset you ever made? So going back, if you can remember, I know it's hard sometimes to remember that kind of stuff, but like, what was the first patcher preset you maybe even like reverse engineered? Like, what's the first plugin that you reverse engineered and made inside patcher?
Actually, the first was high frequency exciter, which I didn't release, on my YouTube channel yet, but I will.
That was the first one you ever made?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it didn't have the fancy interface. It was just a patcher thing that worked very well. So I thought, okay, if I also make knobs in the front, the surface basically, I can actually make it like a lookalike plugin that I can use very fast, and it could be there when I want to use it. So that was the first one, but the very patcher like people expect now with the interface was Inspector, the one that I actually released the first on my YouTube channel.
I saw that one for sure. That one's awesome. So Inspector, if people aren't really familiar with that one, I guess give a quick explanation of what that does, how you came about like recreating that, what plugin came before that made you think about how to, I want to create a version of this of my own, basically inside Patcher. Can you give us the rundown of how that happened?
And the plugin that inspired this patch was Mix Checker, which is a plugin that allows you to change the balance of your track so you can have multiple references, maybe the sound of your track playing through a car or something else, or playing through NS10, the legendary speakers from Yamaha. And I thought that was very clunky, and also it was a paid plugin. And for the features that they give you, I felt like doing my free version, because of course there's nothing really fancy behind the hood. And I created it. And to be fair, that patch is a mess. I created a version 2 of that.
I saw that. And there's a light.
CPU
Isn't there a light version? So there's the main version, a 2, and a light, correct?
Yes. Yeah. There's just improvement. And of course, I kept in mind the CPU usage in the newer versions. So they were easy to load and use, of
Gotcha.
course.
That's awesome, man. I want to know how the hell you changed the frequencies behind the scenes to make it sound like, a phone or the NS10s. Like how do you go about in the back end recreating what those things sound like in order to reference them on the front end, through your monitors or through a pair of headphones? What's that process like?
And the process is you study the frequency response of different systems. And of course, the EQ that I put in the back of the patch, they're little gimmicks. Don't expect that they will sound exactly the same as the speakers or the car, because of course they're different experiences. But you can get an idea where the sweet spot of that frequency band is. For example, in cell phones or laptop computers, basically you hear just high frequency and high mid frequencies. You can get rid of everything else, and you get, the feeling of playing through that system.
Right. And you're using all, like, in the back end, I pretty much know the answer to this, but like you're using all stock FL stuff within inside Patcher, right? Because you can use third-party stuff.
Yes. I saw, actually, before starting releasing stuff, some other patches on the internet, and they were using third-party plugins. And I felt such a bummer that they have maybe a great sounding patch, but to be able to use that, you have to own third-party plugins.
Exactly.
Right.
When I started, I said, okay, but I'm gonna keep it stock plugin because it's way cooler and everybody can use it.
Everybody will have access to it. If you're dropping these Patcher presets for free or even paid, everybody will be able to access everything that there is to have about that Patcher preset.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Frank, when did you start putting out your patches as a sort of like direct to your followers?
In quarantine.
Yeah.
In 2020.
Nice.
Making videos on YouTube was always a little dream of mine, because I like to, educate people sometimes. So I tried to do YouTube videos, and I tried different formats. I tried to make a song in, I don't know, using just house recording because I was in quarantine.
That's an awesome video, by the way.
Thank you.
Love that video. I love that.
Which one?
He did a house remix, but it was, what I mean by house is that it was all stuff he found around his house. He samples. It's good. It's really.
I saw
the Dua Lipa remix.
Oh, that one. I did see that. I didn't watch that one yet.
It's good.
I gotta go.
I was watching that and I was like, oh, I gotta make beats today. I gotta go home and make some beats.
Instant inspiration. Isn't it crazy? Like how so many people have the same story of like when they started or when they like grew the most or when they had a life-changing event or whatever. It was like during the pandemic.
Oh, for sure.
It's
so
so crazy.
scrambled. You got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Try different things out.
COVID changed everything.
And you're in Italy, right?
I'm in Italy.
So you guys, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, not to go crazy into this, but like you guys were really, really shut down. So you guys couldn't really do much of anything.
Yeah, we were the first European country that was in quarantine.
Yeah,
actually.
I remember things were happening. So, I mean, a lot of bad happened, obviously, but a lot, there's some good things that came out of it. Like, it seems like you found like another passion.
Absolutely. When something bad happened, there's, bad stuff, but also opportunities. And I took my chance to get my dream, a reality, making YouTube videos. And that's it. And then when I started doing patches, of course, the response was very good. So I stuck with it.
How do you go about deciding which one you want to make next? Which patcher plugin? Do you listen to your audience? Is it a mixture of listening to your audience and maybe just getting a random idea coming across like a third-party plugin that, like, hey, I want to recreate this. I want to drop this.
The idea usually comes from the fact that I use Patcher when I mix stuff, when I produce. And to basically, I use it the most to get parallel processing, because instead of linking multiple channels and regroup them, sometimes it's a little clunky. So Patcher allows me to do it in one slot, and that's it. And I can bypass that effect, to hear on and off. And sometimes I do something very fancy with third-party plugins sometimes, and I think, oh, let's make a stock version so everybody can still use that.
Right. That's cool. That's really cool.
What's the hardest Patcher preset that you ever made, and how long did it take you to make it? So if you have to look back and think, what's the most involved, the craziest back end? Because this stuff can get crazy, and it's awesome that we have it pulled up here too. So what I'm really interested in is obviously like what the front end looks like, but I want to see the back end of the craziest preset you've ever made. If you can pull it up, if you have it on hand.
It's a difficult question to answer. Of course, the one that took the most time was the reverbs, that I sampled and put into patcher. So there are a lot of impulse responses got from paid plugins that I put into patcher. But of course, all these other patches, I mean, some of them are pretty easy, to be fair, very just smart background routing. Some of them are a little bit more complicated. I think that I'm sorry, taking forever to check.
No, it's all right. There was, while you're looking, there was one that I came across that had like a ridiculous amount of stuff in the background. It might have been the Inspector, to be honest.
Yeah, the Inspector, actually, it's really insane. I can show it on
yeah.
screen.
Let's take a look into the back end of Inspector just to give people an idea what the hell's going on back there. Because look at that. I mean, it's a city. It looks like, you know, it looks
By
like
the way, this
city of
field,
plugins.
a lot of this actually, this formula and a lot of volume stuff, it's not needed. In the newer version, I managed to scrap a lot of things and get the same exact effect. So this was me trying to get the effect done, but I wasn't really expert yet.
Okay.
So if we load up for example, the version 2, as you can see, it's the same effect, which you feel
way less involved.
Way less.
Yeah.
But, the result is the same.
Yep. And like, so what's the, if you can give us like a quick rundown of like beginning to end, like just explain a little bit of what we're looking at here. Because I know right now to a lot of people, this is like a completely different language. And even to me sometimes when I'm still looking at it, like we have all these cables running ins and outs. You have different levels on different cables. The possibilities here are like completely endless. Like I like to talk about all the time. So, I mean, give us like a quick rundown of, right at the beginning from left to right, pretty much.
Yes. So you have to follow the yellow lines. So yellow lines are the audio, and the red wires are carrying information about the knobs, values. So if you follow the yellow stuff, you can see that from FL Studio up here goes inside some plugins. One goes straight to the volume at the end because it's the bypassed. So you can ignore that for now. And so the first one, for example, is a width stock plugin that I use to make it, I think, just to expand the width from here. See?
Yeah, that's the stereo enhancer, right?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Just to check, how much wide your mix should be and how much narrow should be.
And just to stop you real quick, so when you move the knob on the front end, so give us an example of like, all right, so now that we have the stereo enhancer open as well, you can see the knob moving that he's tweaking. So you essentially are connecting that knob on the front end of Inspector to that knob inside of the enhancer.
Exactly. I think that it's very clear if I do this. If I switch the version of the loudspeaker of the system that you're going to play through, you can see how this EQ mimic different type of frequency response.
That's crazy.
So for example, the Nestan, it's very popular because it doesn't have much bass, as you can see. It doesn't have much top end. It's focused on the mid range, but also has some weird frequencies. Weird resonances, especially around the cross area between the two woofer. There's a tweeter and a mid woofer. So those, frequency collapse sometimes and create little notches and little resonances.
Yep.
It's fire.
And if you go on, there's the mix cube, pretty much the same concept. The iLoud micro that I have in my studio, actually, they sound amazing, by the way, super easy to carry around. The car test, it's pretty much, me going in my cars, in my parents' car, my friend's car, and take an average, basically.
So these things take a lot of time. Like this is really heavily involved. It might just look like, oh, it's an EQ map to this knob, but like, there's a lot of research that goes into this.
Yeah, because as I said, I like to experiment and to get something done and the satisfaction to be, oh, that's how it is. That's why the laptop speakers sound like this and not like that. I always ask myself weird questions and I get satisfaction to find the answer to it.
Now, are these different patches that you're putting out, these are primarily through your YouTube and they're free for people to download and install into their FL?
Yeah.
That's huge.
The cool thing is that there's nothing to install because they're stock presets.
So drag and drop.
They can be like 100 kilobytes and that's it. You have the whole thing.
That's awesome.
On my YouTube channel, I set up a gate download link. I had my strategy behind it. Of course, nothing is really free nowadays. So what I ask is they follow me on YouTube. They can always unfollow after.
Yeah, but there's no reason to be honest. They see the value. The value in what you give is crazy. So, I mean, it really is free. And they like I'm subscribed because I'm waiting for the next one, you know. And that's how everybody's looking at the same thing. They want these. Like I said, there's a lot of people that have these presets and are gaining tons of value because, you know, I guess like the main thing is like plugins are expensive. And there's a ton of FL Studio users. And if you can like recreate something that's very similar that can do pretty much the same thing in FL with FL stock plugins, and not only that, the fact that they can go into the back end and reverse engineer it themselves if they want to.
Right.
So if they want to like nerd out on this, they can go back and they can nerd out and they can understand. So like we talked about it last week, is like the whole instant chords in the piano roll function. I look at this the same way. Like this, people could say, oh, it's cheating, you know, it's stealing, it's whatever, right? But realistically, like it's helping people learn even more about sound design and mixing.
It brings back that feeling of like an open source kind of program feel, where like someone who's creating on FL like Frank is then sharing this, you know, this thing that they've created to the community through Discord, through YouTube, through all these different outlets. And like doing it completely for free.
It's awesome.
It's only helping to like propagate this community of producers that are really involved. And like that front end, first of all, I have a question. How do you translate that back end to that super clean front end that you got? Is that like a thing that you do outside of FL and implement in, or is that, how do you create like a front end interface like that? That's amazing.
Oh, it's fairly easy. And yeah, I just do it on Patcher itself. I don't leave the platform at all. I
That's
just
amazing.
edit, as you can see.
Look at that. Come on.
That's so sick.
Name another DAW that has anything like this. There's
not.
There's not
no
one.
way.
There's nothing.
No way.
And actually, they improved quite a bit recently, the interface and also the map, because when I did Smooth, the Smooth clone, actually there was no zoom. So actually, to reply to your question before, yeah, that was the trickiest patch ever, the Smooth, because I couldn't even zoom in and to see, you know, all the wires and stuff. But to do the interface on front, the surface it's called, it's fairly easy. You just have to be creative and, you know, take inspiration from other plugins, of course. And that's it. One of the most awesome feature about the Surface is the step knob, because FL Studio is a digital DAW, of course, but I really like step knobs. I saw them in professional studio, in mastering studio especially, and I like the feeling of it because you can feel the changes. Also, not about this patch that I'm showing.
When you say step knob, that means just like the clicking of the knob in between each one?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And I think that a lot of young producers and mix engineer, but also master engineer, everyone can benefit from that, because what I don't like about digital DAWs is that there's a continuum. If you boost a frequency with an EQ, you go up, you go up, you go up, but you don't feel the step changes. And when you go back, you know, it's very not good for learning, in my opinion. If you have a step knob, you can see, if I do this, if I move 1 dB more, what's going to happen? Oh, now I have this result. If you pull back, you have it back. 2 dB, 1 dB, you know, that approach, I love it. And I create patches for myself just to have a standard EQ in the back. But in the front, I have my step knobs that I can get the result way faster.
Just to give somebody like perspective too, and me. So when you're creating those knobs, I mean, you have an idea. Maybe you want to somewhat replicate and clone the plugin, or the front end, the interface of the plugin that you're, you know, cloning and replicating. You want it to look relatively the same, but like, let's say, like I want, you know, a certain kind of knob or a certain kind of level. Like, how do you go in and choose those kinds of knobs? You want that step knob, right? You want the one that clicks versus the one that doesn't click. Like, how do you go about choosing those? Because those are also all within FL, and they give you a ton of different options that I've never like been able to 100% dive into. But if you can just show everybody like kind of like where to go real quick to access those kinds of things.
Okay, you basically, what you're asking is, I set ranges for the values. For example, let's use this patch again as a reference because it's pretty easily. As you can see, I'm changing the EQ, but if you just pay attention to one, you can deactivate everything but one. Let's just keep the number 2. Okay, no, it's a little clunky. But that value of frequency, amplitude, and Q, it's controlled by, for example, this. Don't crash, please. Thank you. So as you can see, this is very boring. But, okay, this is a little bit more clear. As you move up the knob, as you can see, there's a white line going through all the values. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to highlight it in editing. If this knob goes in the first step, it means that this value goes from here down here. And if I move it to the next step, it goes right up there. So I do this process for every value of the EQ, every amplitude, frequency, and Q of every little thing, you know?
And I guess
I choose the values.
my question was more so like the look of these knobs. What you're saying right now is crazy, by the way, all stuff that I want to know. I guess like the look of the knobs or levels that you have on the front end, where do we go to choose those? Like if I want, you know, like this size knob versus that size knob. See how you have like, you know, you got the two knobs on top and you got, and the colors of them. Like how do we access that?
Of course I want to make the surface look good, but yeah, I mostly set the bigger knobs for the most important effect. For example, let's load up another patch. Maybe it's a little bit more easy to follow. For example, something more complicated. Let's load up Smooth. Smooth has the big knob in the center because it's the main effect.
Yeah.
The other things around can shape the effect here and there, as you can see. This is the main effect. It's in the center. You have the big lookalike EQ, sidechain EQ. And you have the high pass and the low pass. These are bigger knobs because are the knobs that you use the most. This attack and release, they're fine-tuning, so I don't need them to be fancy, big, because it depends when you use them, if you use them.
I guess like for Smooth, can you explain if somebody doesn't know where this one came from? It's from a plugin called Soothe, and this is your version, Smooth. What does Soothe and Smooth do?
Soothe is a resonance suppressor. It means that it looked at your frequency balance. If you load up on a full track, for example, you have all your sounds together, and of course they're gonna have peaks in frequencies. For example, you have a bass, but at some point there's a guitar coming in, so you're gonna have high frequency, spiky. You know, electric guitars are pretty spiky, and you can smooth them out with a resonance suppressor. It means that it's gonna detect where the resonance is and pull it down. How much? It depends how much effect you want. And with this, I recreated the same thing. The problem is this patch is not smart like the real thing, because the real thing has FFT technology, and I'm not gonna go into that. But I have to create that technology with single EQs. For example, every EQ is set like that. There's a little band. So when there's a resonance there and it's gonna go above the threshold, this patch will turn that down.
Can you give us an example and run something through it maybe and show us what it does real quick and like, you know, live in action?
Of course. I have a little loop like that. I have to go look for the EQs that are moving because otherwise it's not interesting. Can do this.
This is crazy. This is awesome.
Maybe just these three.
Yep.
Oh, as you can see, they're moving.
Wow. So what is it? It's detecting frequencies that need to be pulled down.
Yeah. For example, this first EQ on the top, it's looking at lowest frequency, lowest, and then this a little bit higher, and this a little bit higher. We reach the mid-range, basically. So as you can see, this is basically the kick. This big bump here is the kick of this track that's being turned down. Of course, you don't always want that type of effect. This patch allows you to do everything basically in that regards, but you choose, and you can choose with filters and with the sidechain input. For example, you really want to get rid of all the energy of the kick, you should boost with this EQ that area So that effect will be very, very prominent. As you can see now, it's extreme. And there you have it.
Crazy. Man's a genius. FL Patch a genius. You know, I was at NAMM, and I was interviewing L Gene, and we were talking about you. I don't know if you saw that interview, but I think he was asking like, yo, did FL hire you yet? Like FL, you should have a job, bro.
Actually, I never got in direct contact with Imageline, but I'm active on the forum, FL forum, and I saw that a few guys suggested that maybe Frank Paul can create some patches for FL Studio official next release, something like that.
I mean, whatever word that I can put in, I'm putting it in, just to let you know, if that's something that you would like. I mean, because I think you and Imageline should definitely work on some sort of official release together. I think that would be wild and great for the community. Just the stuff that you offer, and I mean, you guys would create something so dope. You know, you can see like how in the back end they've outsourced for that as well in the past with Wise Labs. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes, I saw. Yeah. Getting to work with Imageline on some preset will make my life, you know.
That'd be awesome, man. You put it out there in the universe, it's gonna happen. So it's gonna happen.
How much of your patches have you been using on your releases, your recent music?
Actually, I use them a lot because as I said, I'm a music producer and I produce music, but I'm getting more technical into mixing and mastering now. I like limitations. I've been working with top major mixing and mastering engineers, and I saw how they work, and I'm completely blown away by the workflow of the analog world. Limitations, I discovered that they are really good. Why the master engineer is so much better, of course, beside the experience of maybe someone else that doesn't have the studio, because if you look at the end of every chain, the analog, people say, oh, it sounds better, it's better. I found out, this is a very unpopular opinion, but it's true, that it doesn't sound better. It's the workflow that sounds better. It's the decision making that with analog is so much faster and immediate that will make the big difference at the end. Of course, there's still some sound difference because we're talking about digital is numbers and analog is voltage, but you can get awesome results just with a very good workflow. And patcher presets can help me through limitations. As I said, I don't want to see the EQ curve. I just want to see the knobs, step knobs, you know, and feel the difference with my ear.
Yeah,
they help you out really. So I'm definitely using my patches in my production as well.
That kind of stuff helps me too, man. We talked about it before. Like I'm a visual learner, almost like to my detriment. You know, I have the EQ pulled up and I can see things going on, and I base some of my decisions off of what I see, and it shouldn't be that way all the time. Sometimes maybe, you know, it works, right?
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
There for a reason, right? It's there for a reason. Sometimes I have to rely a little bit more on visual, but I sometimes do that too much. And I think a lot of your presets are going to help a lot of producers in that way, because on the front end, you just, you know, you have the step knobs and you have that, and you can see that, feel the clicking of those knobs, and you can essentially be forced into hearing the difference and not seeing the difference.
Yeah, it's a matter of workflow, as I said. There's no good or right, bad, wrong. So,
right.
As I said, I'm always a visual guy. I've been a visual guy for a long time, and I was chasing perfection more and more and more. But in the end, I felt like I was too perfect, and music needed something more imperfect. And sometimes I suggest everybody to try use something that doesn't allow you to see much in the back.
Yeah.
And maybe go analyze what you did with EQ after. And I'm sure you'll never come up with that curve by looking. That's the limitation I'm talking about.
Super true.
Yeah, like John was saying that he uses the EQ1, the parametric EQ1.
Yeah.
For that reason alone. And I saw that you created an equalizer that has no visual as well, and it almost looks like smooth a little bit. You know, you have like the color scheme going across. I'm sure you can pull it up in 2 seconds.
For example, I have this blind EQ, which is basically that concept.
That's great.
It's just
awesome,
knobs.
Man.
And actually they are step knob, very small step, I think half dB. So you can feel the difference when you turn them up and down and you don't have a continuum. And you can deactivate the bell like clicking anywhere in the surface like this.
Bro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge.
And yeah, basically that's the thing I'm looking for now. And it's helped me a lot. I grew immensely in the past years just by try to not look. Actually, I studied psychoacoustic and acoustic at university, and eyes are deceiving no matter what. I did the most craziest tests about audio illusions. They exist. Your brain make up illusions for you if you use also eyes, and it's incredible. It's the best thing I ever studied. Psychoacoustic.
So true.
What is that called? Psychoacoustic?
Yeah, psychoacoustics. Basically, how your brain reacts to sounds.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Wild. And what, like, again, how this like blind EQ kind of mirrors like that parametric one is that it's training you to listen to the changes and feel the changes as opposed to saying like, oh, just boost up this area here. And like when you're multiplying frequencies like that, it can be very jarring after a while and fatigue your ears.
Right.
But with this, it's just like going solely off of, you know, how does the frequency feel in the mix, in, you know, in context with everything.
It's just forcing you to go by ear. There's another, like the Rosetta EQ does that a lot too by Help Me Devon. Like he created his own plugin that essentially it goes off of, you know, field. Like there's no visual on it whatsoever. So he like it's becoming a good trend, I think, to make EQs that force you to listen instead of see, which in my case, I need it. You know, like that's something that I need. I need something that forces me to just listen.
Yeah.
And just sit back and not go off of the visual.
It's going to be interesting to see how, if like more people sort of follow this trend that Frank is kind of like pioneering here, where it's like you're seeing more and more people who are actively using the software to create original, like, you know, VSTs and stuff within and plugins within. It'll be interesting to see sort of like how it affects just in general how people are mixing and mastering music and making instruments. So like I'm excited to see kind of how this open sourceness of like the software influences how people create.
I think it's already I think it's creating an influence already, to be honest. I think
so cool.
I'm obviously a huge fan of just helping the community, right? And so is Frank and you, and I think that stuff like this is a huge deal in helping create better music all around for the entire community. I think stuff like this is massive, and it's underrated still. Patcher's still underrated. What you do, it's underrated. Like people should be talking about it way, way, way more because of how influential it's going to be on better music in the coming years, bro. I think it's going to be, it's unbelievable. With that being said, like you touched on VST instruments. One of the questions I had for you, Frank, and I'm not sure if you've ever like been able to dive into it, but have you ever created instrument plugins with Patcher?
No, I didn't.
Never?
Never.
So you haven't even like messed with one and never just not released it?
I messed with Patcher instrument, but I rather just use layer, you know. I just layer stuff outside Patcher, and that's my workflow. Yeah, I'm not into that yet. Maybe I will. Who knows?
Okay, so you use the plugin layer?
Yes.
Got you. So we talked about that last week, is that was, somebody mentioned in the comments, something that I didn't know, is that layer was the predecessor to Patcher.
Yeah, it can be that. Yeah.
So they said that came before Patcher. So I don't know if you know like a lot about the background of like when Patcher started, because I don't. Do you know like when it started by any chance? Like when they introduced that to FL?
Actually, yeah. When I was at university, Patcher wasn't there yet, but there was Flowstone. And Flowstone was a software that I think ImageLine was in somehow. Might say something wrong here, but it basically was the old Patcher. And I tried to do something with that, but my computer couldn't run very well, so I just left it there. And then I kind of forget about it for a lot of years. But I was still using Patcher when it came out. As soon as Patcher came out, I immediately started using it. I immediately felt the potential behind it.
How fast can you make a Patcher preset? We talked about this earlier. I think it'd be really cool if you could like cook up something for us on the fly to maybe give away to everybody watching right now.
That would be awesome. It depends about the effect. Recently, I saw a lot of soft clipper and clipper in general, paid clippers, and the technology behind it is actually so easy that I don't see the point in buying any clipper out there. And I can show you.
Let's do it.
Actually, I can show you a clipper with a little twist that no clippers plugin does, which is listen to the distortion you're adding to the sound.
Okay.
It's very easy to do.
That's fire.
So let's start from scratch.
Yeah,
I'm going to load. Actually, I see that you always ask people what's your favorite stock plugin. And of course, I have to say Patcher, but
of course, obviously, that's why I didn't even ask you. That's why I can't even, I didn't even bother asking you, bro, because I already know it. Like, how can it be anything else besides Patcher?
But let's say that I have to name another one. It's Fruity Limiter.
Yeah.
But there's a twist. I like everything about the limiter beside the limiting. I don't like the limiting, but I like the other function. And the gate. Also, the gate is terrible.
Yeah, but, I saw you mention that in a video too. You said that like FL doesn't have like a really good gate.
Yes.
And it's true.
So if you pull down in the limiter, the attack to 0, release to 0, and sustain to 0, like I'm doing here, this is already a clipper. This threshold, the ceiling, it will clip your audio, clean it. Of course, hard clipping, not soft clipping, but it's the effect that I use a lot. As I said, I use a lot of effects in mixing and mastering, and clipping is very useful to be used before dynamic, like compressors and limiters. So if we turn down these 3 knobs, this is already a clipper. So all we have to do is activate this knob so it can be controlled on the surface. You go in the surface, you create a knob. Let's select this, for example. Let's make it bigger.
There it is.
And you connect this to that. So as you can see, if you exit the edit mode, you're gonna control that.
I feel like I'm watching my child be born. Right? It's like we're birthing a child right now.
Anyway, as you can see, this ceiling, of course, is moving the same way, but we don't want to do that actually, because a lot of clipper plugins, they boost the volume into the clipping. And that's very confusing because, of course, if something gets louder, you're going to think, oh, that's better. So all clipping plugins and dynamic VSTs in general, they should actually do the opposite. So increase the effect, but not the volume. And we can actually do that in a very clean way with Patcher. So all we have to do is load something that can allows us to modify the values. So I always use this Fruity XYZ controller. I make the global speed to 0 because we don't want have a delay in in timing. And you can mess with this little graph. So I always mess up with the input, but I think you're supposed to mess up with the output mapping. And for example, with this effect, we want the knob to go from 50% all the way down. Maybe not to 0 this time. Let's give a little room there.
Okay.
And of course, I modify the X value. So I'm going to activate the input of these 3 values. I'm going to use the other 2 very soon. And then output, activate all. So instead of connecting this directly to the effect, I'm going to connect it to the first input, which is the X, and the first output will go here. So now when I turn this knob, as you can see, when I'm at 0, there's no effect going on. But as I turn it up, the ceiling will get put down. So you actually start to distort the audio.
Yeah.
But you don't get more volume. So you actually hear what this clipper is actually doing to your track.
Wow.
And if you want to get some very, very nerdy, one of the technique that I use the most to analyze plugins is doing a null test. It means I flip the phase of the audio and I see the difference, what's coming out as a difference. For example, if we distort with a clipper some music, we're gonna have the distortion of the clipping. Of course, what you gain is you can boost the level more, but you're gonna introduce some distortion into the sound. If it's a little, it can actually be very useful. That's why clippers are so popular nowadays. So I load a Fruity Stereo Shaper, which is another very underrated plugin.
I love this plugin.
I love this one.
And
hell yeah,
there are a lot of presets that allows you to modify very quickly the effect. If you select invert, you can see that basically the amplitude of the left and right channels will be inverted. So this is a clean inversion plugin right now. So you have to, if you want to feel the effect, you have to connect the input in a parallel way, not in chain, because you want to make a sum of the two. So if we play some audio like this, as you can see, let's put it down to 0. As you can see, I'm playing some audio, but there's no output now. If I get rid of this, as you can see, music is coming out. So what does this say? It says that the two parallel process are identical. There's no difference. But look what happened if I start to do some clipping. What you see here is the distortion that you're adding to the sound.
right.
And basically, it's a very easy thing to set up, as you see, but a lot of very high technology plugin has it. For example, the FabFilter Pro L2, it's the best limiter out there, let's be honest. And it has this function, and it's one of the most useful functions ever, because you can select different algorithm and see how much distortion you add in. And this is the exact same thing, but with just two little stock plugins.
Wow.
Of course, to enable the listen, you can add a button, like let's do default button, and we can connect this to another input in this XYZ. We're going to activate the 2-channel amplitude, and we're going to do this.
So now it just goes to that button. So now you can reference the distortion just by clicking on that button.
Yes, but we have to set up the range. And right now we want 0 to minus 0 dB, basically, like inverted phase, which should be around 70%, 75%. Let me pull up. We can actually right-click and copy with C and right-click with V. So you already have the right value there. So as you can see, if it's not very clear, but if we press it, you're gonna put in inverted phase audio, so you're gonna listen to the sound. For example, this is your music playing, you want to start clipping it. So as you can see, the waveform, if I pull this up, is start to get crushed. But at some point you wanna listen, wait, but what I'm losing, I'm gaining some headroom, but what I'm losing. In music production, everything's a compromise. So if you click a button, you're gonna listen only to the pops of the distortion.
Bro, this guy's a genius.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just like that.
And if I have to make this patch a little fancier, I can actually modify the saturation here. And actually, this saturation knob of the limiter is the exact same soft clipper effect. I don't know if you know it, but if you do the same trick, like you invert the phase of one of them, it's the exact same type of distortion.
It turns the limiter into a soft clipper.
Sorry?
So that doing that with the saturation essentially turns the limiter into a soft clipper.
Yes. Okay, so I load up the Fruity soft clipper to show you that doing this with the Fruity limiter is the same as doing this. So putting down the threshold. Of course, I like the visual of the soft clipper, but the Fruity limiter doesn't have it, but it's the same thing.
Wow.
So to make this patch a little fancier, I can add another knob. I can actually duplicate this, like this. And I can connect the new knob to the saturation knob. I activate this, right-click, activate, and the third control goes into the saturation. And this time we want to do this because the knob at 100% is basically 0, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, right now, no saturation. As you pull it up, the ceiling will get pulled down, so you get the effect. And of course, I did this clipper first and the soft clipper after, because I'm following the route of actual this plugin. This plugin has, I think, compression, gain, ceiling, and saturation. It's not very clear from the interface, but if you go in the manual, you see that there's an order.
Wow. That's ridiculous.
We can give this patch. I'm gonna make this patch look good, and maybe we can put an overlay here, and we're gonna get it for free.
Awesome.
Get out for free.
So we're gonna drop this to everybody in the comments. Everybody that's listening and watching, they're gonna be able to grab this for free.
Yeah, and a free copy of FL.
Yeah, so that reminds me. I forget every episode. I forget.
You forget me.
You forget me. You know what? That's the key phrase for today. The key phrase for today's episode to win a copy of FL Studio Producer Edition is "you forget me," because every week I forget. We get into deep conversation and I forget every single week. So again, thank you to FL. Thank you to Frank Pohl. I guess so Frank, can we just hear about where to find you if they don't know where to find you on YouTube, Discord, social media? Where do people find you and get more information about your patcher presets, how to get them, how to download them for free and everything?
They can find me on YouTube. It's very easy. Just type Frank Pohl. And of course, I'm a music producer, so I have Spotify. I have everything. I work as a music producer for a long time, so you can find me everywhere. But my patches are available under the YouTube videos. In the description, you can find the link. And of course, on my Discord server, there are all my patches, plus a lot of patches made by the community, which are a lot, actually.
Wow, that's awesome. Your community's strong, bro. I love it. I love it. So, with that being said, I just want to say thank you again for joining us and, for being so tech savvy with us and being able to share your screen and share your process, share your information, your journey over the years. I just want to say thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for having me.
Goat.
It's been a blast.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, we're going to link everything down in the description. So make sure you get that key phrase, comment it down below. The free patcher preset that Frank Pohl just made live on this podcast is going to be down in the description below as well. Huge. So again, thank you, John. Thank you, Boiler Room. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to share this with a friend if you get me.